Money in rap is supposed to mean forever. Chains, cars, mansions, the image is built on endless wealth, but as we already know, it often doesn't last long. A dumb rapper can go from a multimillionaire to being broke in a month. For the 2 videos I did on the topic, you labeled me racist because of showing black rappers mostly. So getting back to you with this one, for some white rappers, the fortune disappeared faster than their careers. They went from MTV cribs to eviction notices, from chart-topping singles to scrambling for rent. These are 10 white rappers that went even broker than you can imagine. And wait until you hear the story at the end of this video of someone you all know, but someone who just disappeared into poverty without you even noticing. Vanilla Ice. But before we get into the story you all are waiting for, let's start from the modern rap Elvis Presley. Vanilla Ice was never supposed to be a millionaire. He stumbled into rap, got packaged by a record label, and dropped Ice Ice Baby, the first hip-hop single to top the Billboard Hot 100. Overnight, Robert Van Winkle, yeah, that was his name, went from Dallas breakdancer to a global superstar. But when you make tens of millions of dollars at 22 years old with no plan, no guidance, and a career built on one hit, the crash is almost guaranteed. By the early 90s, Vanilla Ice was everywhere. Movies, TV appearances, toys, even a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles soundtrack. His debut album To the Extreme sold over 15 million copies, a number that dwarfs the lifetime sales of most respected rappers, but money poured out just as fast. He bought mansions, cars, and even a pet kangaroo. The industry cashed in on his image, but once the white rapper novelty wore off, the sales evaporated. When his second album flopped, the machine abandoned him. No more sponsorships, no more MTV airtime, no more checks. Vanilla Ice was left with massive overhead, properties, staff, and expenses, but no income to sustain it. He turned to desperate stunts to stay relevant, like staging fake relationships, odd media appearances, and even trying to rebrand as a hardcore metal artist. Nothing worked. By the late 90s, his fortune had collapsed. Lawsuits, failed tours, and terrible investments chewed through what was left. Vanilla Ice admitted years later that he blew through nearly all of his early money. At one point, he was forced to auction off luxury assets just to cover debts. What saved him wasn't rap, it was real estate. Ice began flipping homes in Florida, turning construction projects into his survival plan. Eventually, that side hustle became his lifeline, even spawning a home renovation TV show.
The house, I kept it for a while, few years and stuff. I put $3 million into it, and on top of the 1.8, ended up selling it for $18 million.
One of the biggest one-hit wonders in music history, a man who once outsold Snoop Dogg and Nas combined, managed to lose nearly everything within a decade. Vanilla Ice's story set the blueprint. Fame without foundation doesn't just fade, it bankrupts you. But although Vanilla Ice managed to bounce back and stabilize his financial situations, other rappers weren't as lucky. Riff Raff. If Vanilla Ice was the first blueprint for white rappers going broke, Riff Raff was the neon-colored remix. He called himself the Neon Icon, claimed to be cousins with Hulk Hogan, and bragged about being worth millions. But behind the diamond braids, Lamborghini doors, and Versace-covered lifestyle was a man burning through money faster than he could rap about it. Riff Raff, real name Horst Christian Simcoe, came up through reality TV before hip-hop. He was first spotted on MTV's From G's to Gents, a show designed to take wild street characters and class them up. Instead of refining him, the platform turned Riff Raff into a walking cartoon. He leaned all the way in, grills, tattoos of BET and MTV logos on his body, and the wild viral freestyles that made him a meme before memes really ran the internet. By the early 2000s, he signed to Diplo's Mad Decent label and looked like he might actually break through. His persona was bizarre, but his songs like Tiptoe Wing in My Jawdins and Dolce & Gabbana made waves. For a brief moment, Riff Raff was booked, busy, and dripping in sponsorship money. He even bragged about dropping $45,000 a week on jewelry.
It's keeping your finances like budget below standard, because like if I'm balling and I'm spending like $10,000 a day, then I'll be like, okay, that's not enough. I need to be spending like $20,000 a day.
But when the music slowed down, the spending didn't. Riff Raff blew cash on absurd luxuries, shark tanks in his house, rainbow-colored cars, diamond-covered braids that had to be redone every few weeks, and wild parties where entire rooms of alcohol and drugs disappeared in a single night. At one point, he claimed he was making $2 million a year, yet within a couple of years, he was begging fans on Instagram to buy Riff Raff energy drinks and discount merch to keep the lights on. The IRS came next. In 2019, reports surfaced that Riff Raff was hit with federal tax liens after failing to pay years of back taxes. Lawsuits from former managers and promoters piled on, accusing him of breaching contracts and skipping shows. The more his rap career stalled, the more desperate his stunts became. He tried professional wrestling, tried selling custom dolls of himself, and even promised a Riff Raff cryptocurrency. None of it landed. By 2020, the money was gone. He downgraded his lifestyle, moving into smaller homes and cutting back on the neon flexes that once defined him. The rapper who once claimed he'd be the white Tupac had gone from Versace luxury to scrambling for clout just to pay off debts. Riff Raff's downfall wasn't quiet though. He turned it into performance art, trying to convince the world that being broke was just part of his character. But the truth is simpler. He made millions, spent millions, and lost millions. The neon icon burned bright and burned out just as fast. Everlast. When you think of white rappers in the 90s, one of the first names that comes to mind is House of Pain. They gave the world Jump Around, an anthem that still shakes arenas, frat houses, and dive bars 3 decades later. And at the front of it all was Eric Schrody, better known as Everlast. For a moment he had it all: hit records, MTV fame, and major label backing. But as quickly as the checks came in, they disappeared. Everlast's first real taste of money was short-lived. House of Pain's debut album went platinum off the strength of Jump Around, but the group couldn't replicate the magic. Their second and third albums fell flat, and the band split in 1996. Everlast wasn't the voice of an iconic crew anymore. He was a solo artist trying to figure out how to pay for a lifestyle built on past success. The situation turned worse in 1998 when Everlast suffered a massive heart attack at just 29 years old. At the time, he was uninsured, meaning the medical bills alone were enough to wipe out what was left of his fortune. While recovering, he pivoted into a new sound, mixing hip-hop with acoustic blues. The gamble paid off briefly. His solo single, What It's Like, became a surprise hit, earning him a Grammy nomination. But one single doesn't build financial security, and his follow-up projects never matched that level of success. Behind the scenes, Everlast was drowning in debt. He admitted in interviews that between medical bills, poor spending, and the collapse of House of Pain's income, he had to file for bankruptcy. The man who once toured the world with platinum plaques was suddenly starting from scratch. For years, he bounced between indie labels, guest features, and small tours just to stay afloat. Lawsuits didn't help either. Everlast got caught up in royalty disputes, label fights, and financial battles that dragged out in court. Unlike other rappers who blew their fortune on cars and jewelry, his collapse was more tragic: medical debt, industry politics, and a career that peaked too early. By the 2000s, Everlast reinvented himself yet again, forming the group La Coca Nostra, yes, Coca, with other underground legends. It gave him a cult following, but nothing close to the money he once had. To this day, Jump Around still makes him some royalties, but not enough to erase decades of financial struggle. Everlast's story is different from Vanilla Ice or Riff Raff. He didn't just waste money on bad choices, he was crushed by bad luck, bad timing, and the brutal reality of being a one-hit wonder twice. For a moment, he was the face of white rap in the 90s, but soon after, he was another casualty of an industry that doesn't give second chances. Kreayshawn. I didn't think that a woman would ever make it into one of my videos with a title like this, but Kreayshawn did, and you'll find out later, she's not the only one. The early 2000s were the wild west of YouTube rap, and nobody rode that wave harder than Kreayshawn. In 2011, her breakout single Gucci Gucci exploded online, pulling in millions of views and making her the face of a brand new era of internet rap. She looked like the future, edgy, ironic, and completely unlike the polished pop stars labels we're used to. For a few months, Kreayshawn was everywhere, and Interscope Records threw $1 million deal at her to lock her in. But viral fame and industry money rarely mix. Kreayshawn spent big before the checks had even cleared. Lavish shopping sprees, designer clothes, flashy videos, she leaned into the Gucci Gucci lifestyle while the hype was still hot. Behind the scenes though, she was racking up serious debt. Her deal with Interscope fronted her huge advances, but the money wasn't free. Everything she spent had to be recouped through album sales, and when her debut project dropped, it bombed. Something About Kree sold fewer than 4,000 copies its first week, an embarrassing number for an artist the label had just poured millions into. The reviews were brutal, and her momentum vanished overnight. Suddenly, Kreayshawn wasn't the future of internet rap. She was a cautionary tale. The fallout was immediate. With her album tanking, she was stuck, owing the label money she could never pay back. Tours barely sold, merchandise flopped, and her one big single wasn't enough to sustain her. By 2014, Kreayshawn publicly admitted she was broke. She revealed she had to scrape together money from odd jobs and random DJ gigs just to survive, all while raising her newborn son. It didn't help that her brief fame came with enemies. She had high-profile beef with Azealia Banks, Lil Debbie split from her white girl mob collective, and critics wrote her off as an industry plant. Without a fan base or label backing, Kreayshawn disappeared from the mainstream. By the late 2000s, she had pivoted completely away from music. She worked in creative directing, design, and online content, but the rap career that once looked worth millions had left her with nothing but debt. From a $1 million record deal to public admissions of being flat broke, Kreayshawn became one of the fastest financial collapses in hip-hop history. Her story is short, sharp, and brutal. One viral hit, one massive label push, and then nothing. Kreayshawn went from being courted as the next big thing to being a reminder that viral doesn't equal valuable, and the industry doesn't refund broken hype. Next, we have the most famous guy from this list, and a person that made everyone feel like a rock star in 2017, but wasn't able to handle the lifestyle himself. The rapper you've all been waiting for, Post Malone. Post Malone didn't look like the kind of rapper who'd end up in the middle of financial chaos. He wasn't flaunting Lambos on Instagram every week. He wasn't burning stacks of cash on camera. But behind the laid-back vibe, Post's money problems got so bad that insiders said he was living like a millionaire paycheck to paycheck. His rise was insane. White Iverson went viral, Republic Records signed him, and within a year he was performing alongside Kanye West. By 2019, Post was one of the biggest artists on earth, stacking platinum plaques and selling out arenas. But the success came with a lifestyle that drained his fortune almost as fast as it came in. Post turned his homes into playgrounds. His Utah mansion became infamous for being part frat house, part arcade, part gun range. Friends described it as a 24/7 party, with thousands of dollars in alcohol and weed disappearing in a single week. His love for Bud Light was so extreme that the company literally partnered with him, but sponsorship checks couldn't keep up with his spending. Cars, jewelry, and random shopping sprees added to the damage. Post admitted he casually walked into luxury stores and dropped 6 figures without thinking. He wasn't showing it off on camera like some rappers, but the money leaked out of his accounts just the same. Then came the IRS report surfaced that Post had neglected to handle his early millions properly, leaving him with massive tax liabilities. At one point, he nearly lost his Utah property over unpaid bills. Insiders claimed his team was scrambling behind the scenes to clean up years of financial mismanagement. The irony is brutal. Post Malone was breaking streaming records, racking up diamond singles, and becoming one of the most recognizable artists of his generation. But financially, he was close to ruin. Friends said he'd sometimes stress about whether a dip in touring or streaming numbers would leave him bankrupt. The image of a calm, easygoing superstar was hiding someone skating on the edge of financial disaster. By 2022, Post seemed to realize how dangerous the situation was. He cut back on the non-stop parties, tightened his circle, and leaned harder into business deals to stabilize his finances. He's not broke today, but the fact that he came so close while sitting at the top of the rap game is more shocking than any one-hit wonder blowing through an advance. Post Malone's story isn't just about waste, it's about how even the biggest stars in the world can almost lose everything if the money isn't managed right, and that brush with financial ruin makes his name the most surprising one on this list. Stitches. For a brief window in the mid-2000s, Stitches looked like he might be the next viral rap star. Covered head to toe in tattoos, including an AK-47 inked across his face, Stitches didn't just rap about cocaine, he built his whole persona around it. His breakout track, Brick and Yo Face, became a YouTube sensation in 2014, racking up millions of views. The video was pure chaos, guns, bricks of powder, and Stitches screaming with unhinged energy. Overnight, he had the internet's attention, and with that came the promise of real money. But the fame didn't last long. Stitches leaned so hard into his image that he boxed himself in. He wasn't marketable to labels, he couldn't cross into radio, and his fan base was more interested in the spectacle than the music. At the peak of his virality, he was booking shows and making solid cash. But instead of investing, he lived the lifestyle he rapped about: constant drug use, luxury spending, and endless drama. The money poured out faster than it came in. His biggest headline moment came in 2015 when he tried to confront the game in Miami. The result? He got knocked out cold by the game's manager in front of cameras. That clip went viral, cementing him as a joke rather than a legitimate rapper. The stunt might have given him attention, but it destroyed any credibility he had left. From there, Stitches' career spiraled. He kept releasing music, but the views declined, the shows got smaller, and the cash dried up. By 2017, he was facing multiple legal problems, including drug and gun charges. With mounting legal fees and no major label backing, his finances collapsed. Reports surfaced that he was struggling to pay basic bills, and his once flashy lifestyle vanished. Stitches Stitches tried to pivot into desperate hustles. At one point he launched a weed company, promised a reality TV show, and even attempted to monetize his beef persona. None of it worked. Fans moved on, promoters stopped calling, and his music barely made a dent on streaming platforms. Today, Stitches is more known as a cautionary tale than a rapper. His career burned bright for a year, then crashed into complete obscurity. The fortune he flashed in videos evaporated, leaving behind debts, arrests, and the stigma of being one of hip-hop's most infamous one-hit clowns. In the end, Stitches' story is brutally simple. Viral fame can make you rich fast, but if you can't sustain it, the money disappears even faster. One viral song built his career, and when the internet laughed and moved on, so did his income. Asher Roth. In 2009, hip-hop was dominated by street anthems and trap beginnings. Then came Asher Roth, a suburban white kid rapping about beer pong and frat parties. His breakout single I Love College became an anthem for campus life, blasting at every dorm, frat house, and spring break trip in America. Almost overnight, Asher Roth went from an unknown Pennsylvania kid to a platinum-selling star with a major label deal. For a moment, he looked like he might be the next Eminem, or at least the funny college version. The money poured in fast. Asher was booking shows across the country, moving records, and pulling in endorsement checks. His image as the everyday college bro who raps made him wildly marketable, and the industry saw him as a crossover star. But the problem was obvious: college anthems don't age well. By the time his debut album Asleep in the Bread Aisle dropped, the hype was already fading. It sold decently, but nowhere near enough to justify the millions his label had invested. Behind the scenes, Asher lived like the star he thought he was becoming. Lavish parties, heavy spending, and big city living drained his money. He wasn't pulling in enough to balance it out. Worse, the industry turned on him. Critics wrote him off as a gimmick, and fans who wanted another I Love College never got it. His later singles barely charted, and by 2011, Asher was slipping into irrelevance. Financially, the collapse came quickly. Without steady tour money or album sales, his advances ran dry, and like most major label contracts, what he had been given up front had to be recouped. Once the hype was gone, Asher was left with debt and dwindling income. By the mid-2000s, he had essentially disappeared from mainstream rap, surviving off small indie shows and side projects. He tried to reinvent himself as a serious rapper, even moving to Atlanta and experimenting with different sounds, but the fan base wasn't there. Asher openly admitted in interviews that he was broke, struggling to make ends meet after blowing through his initial wave of money. The college kid dream life turned into a financial nightmare. Today, Asher Roth still makes music, but it's independent, low budget, and far from the arena tours and MTV appearances he once had. His downfall wasn't caused by scandals or arrests, it was simply the brutal reality of being a one-hit wonder with big expenses and no backup plan. Asher's story is almost textbook. Major label pumps millions into an artist believes the hype, and when the sales don't live up, they're left broke and forgotten. I Love College made him rich for a moment, but once the keg ran dry, so did the money. Paul Wall. In the mid-2000s, Houston rap was running the game. Mike Jones, Slim Thug, Chamillionaire all breaking out nationally, and right in the middle of that wave was Paul Wall, the people's champ. He wasn't just rapping, he was cashing out through grills. Paul and his partner Johnny Dang turned diamond-encrusted mouthpieces into a full-blown business. For a few years, Paul Wall was everywhere. Platinum albums, BET and MTV rotation, and millions flowing in from both music and jewelry. But like most rap fortunes, it didn't last. At the peak of his career, Paul Wall was making serious money. His album The People's Champ debuted at #1 in 2005, and his collabs with Kanye, Nelly, and Slim Thug kept the checks rolling. On top of that, his grill business was booming. Everyone from Lil Jon to T.I. to Nelly was buying custom mouthpieces, and Paul Wall was cashing out heavily. But rapid money brings rapid spending. Paul admitted later that he wasn't managing his finances, living like the good times would never end. The collapse came when the Houston wave cooled off. By 2007, the mainstream moved on, sales slowed, and suddenly the rap checks weren't covering the lifestyle anymore. The jewelry business slowed too, with lawsuits and tax issues hitting behind the scenes. Paul revealed in interviews that he got audited by the IRS, and the financial hit almost bankrupted him. He went from multi-million-dollar houses to worrying about keeping his family afloat. Unlike some rappers, Paul Wall didn't completely vanish. He kept touring, releasing mixtapes, and doing features, but the days of million-dollar advances and platinum sales were over. By the early 2000s, he was grinding just to stabilize. In his own words, he lost it all more than once, forced to rebuild from the ground up. Part of what hurt Paul Wall financially was his generosity. He spent huge amounts on friends, family, and entourages, only to be left footing the bill when the industry moved on. He admitted later that he had to cut his circle down and live a more humble lifestyle to avoid total collapse. Today, Paul Wall is respected as a Houston legend, but his story proves that even rappers with real businesses and platinum hits can blow through millions. The Grills empire, the MTV fame, the platinum plaques, it all looked like forever money. But just a few years later, Paul Wall was struggling like the average guy, rebuilding his career while carrying the scars of financial mismanagement. The people's champ wasn't immune. He went from iced out grill king to a cautionary tale, proof that hip-hop waves don't last forever, and neither does the money if you don't protect it. Aaron Carter. Aaron Carter might not be the first name that comes to mind when you think of rappers, but for a period in the late 2000s and early 2000s, he leaned heavily into hip-hop to reinvent himself. Unfortunately, the only thing more chaotic than his music was his money. Aaron started as a teen pop sensation in the early 2000s, selling millions of records and touring the world. By age 13, he was already worth tens of millions of dollars, but like most child stars, he had zero control over the money. His parents managed everything and mismanaged it to the point that when Aaron turned 18, he discovered most of his fortune was gone. Lawsuits, bad investments, and parental mismanagement had chewed through what should have set him up for life. To try to rebuild, Aaron shifted into rap-leaning music, releasing mixtapes and trying to tap into the hip-hop scene. He even battled Shaquille O'Neal in a freestyle stunt and performed with rappers at small club shows. But the transition didn't work, and the crowds got smaller and smaller. By 2013, Aaron filed for bankruptcy. Court documents revealed he was over $3.5 million in debt, while only having a few $1,000s in assets. His credit card debt alone was nearly $500,000. Things didn't improve. Aaron's attempts at reality TV, OnlyFans, and bizarre livestream rants were clearly moves to scrape together money. He flexed luxury cars online, but most were rentals. He sold access to his personal life, feuded with his own family, and tried anything to stay relevant, but it all reeked of desperation. What made Aaron Carter's downfall different from someone like Vanilla Ice or Riff Raff is how public it was. He went from arenas and TRL appearances to Instagram lives where he begged fans to buy his merch to keep him afloat. His face tattoos, erratic behavior, and collapsing finances became tabloid material. By the late 2000s, Aaron was still performing at tiny venues, earning just enough to survive. In one interview, he admitted he was basically living week to week, despite having once been one of the most recognizable young stars in America. It was a staggering fall, millions earned, millions lost, and nothing left behind but headlines. Aaron Carter's attempt to pivot into rap didn't save his career, and it definitely didn't save his finances. His story is one of the saddest in music, a star who had it all before he even hit high school and lost it all before he hit 30. Iggy Azalea. Remember I told you that there was more than one girl on this list? Where, here we are. In the early 2010s, Iggy Azalea looked unstoppable. The Australian rapper stormed the charts with Fancy, one of the biggest singles of 2014, and suddenly she was headlining festivals, winning awards, and being pushed as the next major female rap star. The money rolled in fast, millions from record sales, tours, endorsements, and fashion deals. For a while, Iggy was everywhere, but the bigger they are, the harder they fall. By 2015, the backlash was in full swing. Critics accused her of cultural appropriation, fans turned on her, and other rappers dissed her relentlessly. The controversies started drying up her income streams, tours were cancelled, singles flopped, and sponsors backed away. But the worst hit came from the IRS. In 2016, it was revealed that Iggy owed over $390,000 in unpaid taxes. The number grew in later years, with reports suggesting she was facing nearly $1 million in tax debt. Her expenses didn't slow down. Iggy admitted in interviews that her lifestyle was difficult to maintain once the big hits stopped. Cars, fashion, and a Hollywood home drained her savings. Without consistent chart-topping success, the money simply couldn't keep up. She tried to rebuild with independent releases and OnlyFans in recent years, which helped stabilize her finances, but the fall from superstardom to scrambling for stability was brutal. Iggy went from having one of the biggest songs in the world to pleading with fans online that she wasn't broke, while tax records told a different story. Her story closes out this list for one reason. She shows that even the most high-profile artists, backed by major labels and positioned as the next global superstar, can lose almost everything when the fame evaporates and the bills don't stop. And although she seems to be doing good now, she's looking for a sugar daddy or something. I've seen this recent clip of her on stream saying that someone earning less than $50 million a year is not a man. Like what? That girl's got freaking double standards.
If you're gonna do that and you're paying for my lifestyle, that's like you gotta make another $15 million a year just to pay for my
From Vanilla Ice to Iggy Azalea, the pattern is the same. Sudden fame, sudden money, and sudden collapse. Some blew it on wild spending, others got crushed by bad deals, and a few just couldn't survive once the spotlight moved on. And Post Malone, the biggest name on this list, shows that it doesn't matter how high you climb. If you don't control the money, it can all come crashing down. White rappers aren't immune. In fact, their stories prove that in hip-hop, success is rented, not owned, and if you don't pay the price, you end up paying with everything else. I hope you like these 3 parts of broke rappers. Now this topic will be over on the channel. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, hit the like button, click on the cards displayed on your screen to see more awesome videos, and don't miss out on the next releases. See ya!